Hey, thanks for joining us today on We Move Forward Together. I am so excited about what you're about to watch and listen to. What if you could take a faith community that takes the best of the Catholic worker movement, the Dominican sisters, the Jesuits, and you put it into one all-encompassing journey? That's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk to Sean and Karen, the founders of the Benincasa Community group based in Connecticut, and they have a fantastic story, and we really cover it all. I think you're going to enjoy it, and hey, let's go check it out. Hey, I'm so excited about our episode today, and it was such an interesting connection for me with this new religious order idea, and we'll get deep into it. So let me just jump right to it. Sean and Karen, welcome to the We Move Forward Together podcast.
Thank you for having us.
So my limited knowledge, it's Benincasa Community, and we're going to pull up your website and that sort of thing. And tell me about how, I think it's going on over 10 years now, how three lay Catholics got together and the idea of it. Tell me about the tie-in to the Dominican.
So we celebrated our 10th year this summer. And so we are just a little bit past that 10-year mark, which is amazing. So 10 years ago, we're looking at or interacting with folks who are in their late 20s, who have done a lot of the formation programs. So I'm hearkening back to that time. There are so many of us who went to Catholic schools, had particularly, I'd say, a Jesuit formation, certainly could have encountered the Dominicans or a number of different orders. And then after college, there are these really great programs where you can do a volunteer year of service. And I think lots of people have found those connections. Oh, you did this program over here, you went over here, sort of like AmeriCorps, but the religious orders did a really great job of creating those programs, those years of service. And then after those years of service, I think if you want to just continue in your faith formation and in your work of ministry, you could either join religious life, which for lots of folks just wasn't an option. The old order just didn't fit for a number of reasons. That, I think lots of people are unpacking, who are professionals, who are theologians, who are academics, but just, I think for us, for our purposes, saying not a fit. And the institutional church wasn't really speaking to people. Sexual scandal, financial, just uber wealthy, a sense that that's not where the ministry was in the institutional church. So I think these lay programs connected to religious orders were really wonderful and really spoke to people, really touched people's hearts, gave a way forward. And then after that, there was sort of a drop off. You hit the ledge. And it was like, if you're an adult who wants to practice their faith in a committed way, take seriously that call to the gospel, there was really limited sort of models or entry points. I think the Catholic worker, which is certainly a movement we're a part of, does a great job of providing a lifelong way to live out your faith. But I think people particularly called to religious life and not finding a fit, there was this sort of drop off in program. And so I think certainly myself, Sean, and he can speak more to this, our friend Jimmy, but many other folks in and out of religious life were thinking about what it might look like if we had a committed community of prayer, were dedicated to the works of mercy, but also had professional tracks. So social work, teaching, lawyering, education. What could this new form look like?
Yeah, you know what I find so interesting is it's making that connection, that gap with what I would call the institution of the church, with the scandals and everything else, and service. The key is service. And Sean, let's hear from you. Tell me your story.
Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up Catherine of Siena, is who I was thinking of when you initially presented the question, because I think that we're kind of in the spirit of what some people would call reform, right? And I think that there is a sort of, we're in an era of reform, I think, in the church, in the same way that we have been in the past. And I think in the same way that we were during the Middle Ages when Catherine was walking the earth, right? That there's a recognition in sort of the church public that the church institutional isn't living up to its creeds and its beliefs. And I think that that reaction that folks are having, and often young people, to this sense of, I don't really feel like there's a place for me, is really coming from the understanding that not only is there not a place for me, I'm no longer welcome, but I'm not seeing that there's integrity in action. And so I think that in that spirit, there's an impulse and a drawing forth to reform. I think embedded and woven into reform is also always the creation of new, right? And so, we have kind of the emergence of the Catholic worker, which was really a new way of being in the world that was connected very deeply to old understandings of what it meant to be Catholic. And I think similarly, the spirit of Benincasa is both, an active effort to kind of present conversations and practices of reform, and at the same time, really exhibiting and embodying a spirit of something new. And so that's deeply connected to sort of the charism of the Dominican sisters, because it's taking those kind of frameworks of the four energy centers or the four pillars, however you want to sort of term them,
Hmm.
and saying that this framework is appealing because there is a variety and a diversity of ways to kind of live them out, right? And so I think that that is sort of at the center of really how Benecasa has emerged over the last 10 years and continues to emerge, right? That those are grounding principles that guide kind of our response to the way we are being called to live out faith in the world.
Tell me more about Benincasa. I'm very interesting about your structure and what you do.
Yep. So right after college, I went to law school and I moved to New York for law school. Actually, so I moved to New York to live with Dominican sisters right after college. I did that volunteer year that we talked about. I lived with 3 sisters in a mostly empty convent in a part of Brooklyn that was not yet gentrified, and please God, let it not be.
Which part? I got to ask you which part.
It was
Okay,
East
gotcha.
Flatbush. Yeah. East Flatbush, Brooklyn. So, and they had been teachers. Also, one had served in Maryknoll. They were really, like you say, in the trenches, in the parishes, in the schools. And it was an amazing year. And then after that, I went to law school. I had this year of formation, living with sisters in the prayer rhythm, going to conferences, having an academic, that commitment to study, really engaging with scripture and with, theology, and then went to law school and started volunteering at the Catholic Worker and Mary House. And I think, like what you're saying, like both the Dominican sisters, who were quite older, they were, sort of, I think 75 was sort of the average age, and I was 22. So I was learning from them a model they had lived and were trying to live into the future. And then volunteering at the Catholic Worker, which was very much intergenerational and lots of ages. But those communities, along with Dan Berrigan's community, were very intertwined. They were all expressions of the same spirit. And I think Sean so beautifully captured that sense of reform and new. And I think you could see that with the Dominican sisters, this taking that call to Vatican II very seriously.
Hmm.
Dorothy and Peter, starting in 1933, but really, finding their sort of full expression during that time of Vatican II. And then Dan Berrigan and the Plowshares movement around Vietnam, sort of that call to being anti-war. So I think those communities have all that expression. They are an expression of that same fire. Catherine of Siena talks about that fire, and I know in a moment of ecological crisis, fire maybe terrifies us a little bit more. Wildfires, for sure, but I think the burning of the heart, that fire, that passion in those communities felt that for reform and for newness. So I interacted with those communities, and then Sean and many others in our community sort of similarly interacted with and met those communities, not the Dominicans until later, Sean, but I think similarly met the Catholic Worker and
Mm.
and
Yeah, it's very so I want to one word jumped out at me in what you were just saying, and that is formation. Okay.
Hmm.
It can be a churchy word. And in that, I was a deacon at one point, so I went through formation. I'm like, yeah, I'm 50 some odd years old. What am I still being formed for? Expand upon that for a while. Were you thinking of becoming a religious at the time, or you just talking about your journey?
So Sean and I both, and several others in the community, either took various steps into religious life. So
Okay.
some people sort of entering in those early postulant or early stages, others just seeking and looking at other communities. So Sean and I both discerned religious life, and several others did. I think this idea of formation is key,
Hmm.
is critical, is key, because we have completely messed up our sense of what education is, right? We are, what are we learning for, right? Like, what is an education for? What are we learning for? And I think certainly education and formation is not, our cat has joined us, not not just for children, right? We are always in the process of becoming, and we are being formed for something. And that something is to be a vessel for the Spirit, and to let the Spirit form us so that we can pour out into the world that message, the gospel message, that radical message of love. I think, this is not a journey to do alone. We need elders and we need ancestors. That's, transmitting of that truth from generation to generation. That's a part of formation. But also, we need to expand our practices, right? Every generation needs to have its own practice. We can't just do the practice or just the education or just the information from the elders and ancestors, right? So formation needs peers. So we need ancestors and elders, and we also need peers, right? And we need a program, right? Like, even the most disciplined of us, even the most self-driven of us, you know, can't just wander out on our own. And I do think I love decentralized and anarchist principles, but that doesn't mean that you're alone,
Right.
right? That means that you're in community locally. And so I think that sort of sense of formation is like constant. It's not just for children. It's ancestral, it's peer, and it has to have some sort of program, or we're just going to willy-nilly do what we want on a different day. We need something to call us back to rhythm. And so I think that's really what formation is. Religious life has those that shell. It has that system in place. I don't think that they've always done it well, and I don't know that it's always been spirit-led, but there's a program. And I think we are very interested in, okay, if the church crumbles, if religious life as we know it in this moment fades away, what is the formation that we're going to give one another? Or what is that practice of being formed that we're going to hand down? And I think this is key about the Dominicans.
Hmm.
Whether they know it or not, whether they say it or not, whether they've internalized it or not, I think they have this magical formula in the 4 pillars. And Sean, jump in. Don't, I can see that I'm getting on a roll, so jump in. But I think that these 4 pillars are the secret. And then I think the 4 pillars are more of a practice.
Okay.
So you could do the 4
Fair enough.
pillars practice with each energy center.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Putting it into action and practice.
yeah, so whether you are working on, so if ecology, right? So tell me why don't you list again the energy centers?
Okay. The energy centers are spirituality,
Hmm.
community,
Hmm.
ecology, and social justice.
Okay. So I think a slight difference is how you approach those using the Dominican 4 pillars. So the
Okay.
4 pillars are prayer, study, community, and ministry, which is just at all times, you should be aware of if you are unbalanced or balanced in those practices. So you should never just be at this kitchen stirring soup. You become a martyr oh my gosh, I'm here all day. I'm the only one serving soup.
Right.
The line is endless, but if you're only, so then you need to take a step back and do some critical thinking, some analysis, some theological development. You need to pray, right? And you need to be in community. Likewise, if one person is only praying all the time or only studying, the academics in their ivory towers, right? And they're
Hmm.
not at the soup, then they are like anything they write is absolute bullshit because it is
Right.
not connected to the ministry, right?
Yeah.
So if they're writing poetic words about the soup, I don't read it. It has no meaning, right? Um, and I think community, like community has to be a commitment. We might be like, community is friends, right? Like
Mm.
we all need friends. We all want friends. We all want peers. But like community is more like family, it is hard to be in community, committed community.
Right.
Like
Sure.
me and this person and this person and this person are going to journey together. And their opinion matters and their capacity matters and their interests matter. So I think whether you're talking about ecology or you're talking about community or these energy centers, I like that. I like the energy center development. But I think if you're not balanced in doing those 4 activities every day, you're
Okay.
going to be a nightmare. You're going to be a monster person. Like
Right. You're
you're
gonna be
going to have,
a one
yeah,
trick obsessed pony about whatever.
yes, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. And I think we are such a society of experts and like expertise and skill level that we have devalued being a balanced human who can do all of these things, and we are so individualistic. Like, I'm this kind of person, which means therefore I don't need to engage in these other activities because
Right.
I have found myself to be this. I've taken the test and I'm this kind of person, and therefore I will not be doing that other thing. And that's just not
Right.
good. So I like the energy centers. I think that's beautiful, but I'm going to be an old school Dominican and stick with the pillars because I think that practice leads to a really well balanced life.
So bring me back to that time where you recognized the cliff, the gap, whatever you want to call it. And how did the germ idea of Benecasa really come and kind of bring me through the stages to where you are in Connecticut right now and how that progressed for you?
I mean, that's a story for sure. And I think, I
Right.
mean, the best way to sort of tell that story, I think, is to sort of say, again, to go back to something that we were talking about previously, which is like how do we integrate what we've learned and accumulated in our faith lives and in our formation and integrate them into the world around us, right? And so, this part of the story is really Karen's story, but to sort of start off, Karen had this desire, this sort of calling placed on her heart to really, from all of those years of experience with the Dominican sisters and the Catholic worker, to start something new. And was working as a housing attorney with folks who were facing foreclosure during the predatory mortgage lending crisis, right? And so there was efforts for years and years and years to try to keep people in their homes. Simultaneously, it sort of coalesced with the time when the Archdiocese of New York was consolidating and closing a lot of parishes. And so suddenly you have all of these empty buildings. You have people in need of housing. Homelessness continues to be on the rise all across the country, but especially here in the Northeast,
Mm-hmm.
or I would say particularly in the Northeast. That's where we are. And so here's an opportunity, right, for the church and the church leadership to kind of put those espoused beliefs into practice, right? We have all of these empty. Every parish had a convent, a rectory, a school, and a sanctuary, right? And so there's all of this empty space. At the time, there was about 60,000 people who were unhoused in New York City. And so Karen spent years sort of going around with other friends and with Dominican sisters and others to sort of say, like, here's an empty building. We can convert it into housing for folks. And there's this whole demographic of young people who are really desiring something new
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of live out their faith. And so after a lot of no's, there was finally one yes, and we sort of renovated this empty convent and rented this empty convent on West 70th Street in Manhattan. And there were 17 bedrooms and, little convent cells. So tiny little bedrooms where you could kind of fit a bed, a desk, and a chair and a lamp. We were able to open our doors there and sort of have community with folks who were both in need of housing because they were seeking asylum, because they were leaving domestic violence situations, because they were LGBTQ youth who had been kicked out of their homes, and also this group of people who were professionals in the traditional sense of being lawyers, social workers, teachers, nurses, and MDiv graduate students sort of living together in community with one another. And also, again, kind of really trying to practice and put into practice these 4 pillars. So we were sharing meals together. We were praying together. We were celebrating liturgy together. And we were also out in the community, either professionally doing works of mercy or sort of collectively doing works of mercy and acts of resistance in the public sphere. And kind of concurrently with that, we were also working on a farm called Harmony Farm, which is owned by the Dominican sisters in upstate New York. And because we sort of had this desire to increase our sort of awareness of and commitment to ecology and the earth and the new cosmology, and sort of in working there and sort of working in kind of a large CSA program, we were bringing a lot of food to the city, to food pantries and soup kitchens and things like that. But I think more importantly, we understood that it was equally important to bring folks with limited land access to those experiences of nature on the land, so
Right.
that it wasn't just a sort of, one direction of service provision, but that, there was also an opportunity for a mutual exchange. And that's really kind of grounded in again, this interweaving of the 3 kind of charisms, right? That the Catholic worker in their kind of design really believe in the integration of the urban and the rural, and those 2 communities really feeding each other spiritually and material. And then the rent got too high in the building that we had renovated, and we couldn't stay there any longer. It was the middle of COVID, and they wouldn't adjust the rent.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
The Archdiocese of New York
Yeah,
would
the
not adjust the
Archdiocese of
rent.
New York. So we found another convent in Queens and renovated that on top of St. John's Preparatory School in Astoria, Queens. And all the while really looking for and desiring a way to really grow what we had experienced and sort of formed in our minds around having like an ecology center where farming could happen. It could be a community farm. So we had a lot of kind of swings and misses on that until we finally found this funny little plot of land in Guilford, Connecticut. And we've been here almost 5 years now. Is that?
Okay.
Yeah. So, and, and yeah, we have, sort of operate a small farm where everything that we grow goes to area food pantries and soup kitchens and farmers markets who have a focus on food apartheid and relieving food apartheid. And then we bring a lot of student groups
Sean,
and
let
things
me
like that
stop you
here as
there.
well to have experiences of retreat.
So, Sean, I got a question for you. And one term that came to me through my daughter Faith was, it's the first time I heard it, this was years ago, was food desert. And you used the term food apartheid. What explain what is that?
I guess, well, I would use the term food apartheid because I think that it conveys the actual act of sort of aggressively and violently removing food and healthy food access from particular neighborhoods, particularly brown and black neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods. So it's not just a food desert sort of conveys that this is a natural occurrence. Food apartheid communicates that this is a violent act from state actors, from capitalism, to sort of ensure that folks who are poor remain poor and unhealthy. And then, of course, also all of the ways that systemic oppression happens through the healthcare industry. So that's really, it's just to sort of communicate that is an intentional act, not a natural occurrence.
Gotcha. So
It drives me nuts that the current administration who's like talking about healthy foods and like removing red dye number whatever, is like not connecting that with like the economics of how much it costs to go to Whole Foods and how you have to Whole Foods grocery store is only located in certain neighborhoods. It's like, I mean, God bless the bodegas because they feed people, but like, I just,
Yeah,
the
what they feed people.
disconnect between how much it costs to have food and like blaming people for not being healthy and then creating systems where grocery stores aren't, it's just like, I mean, no, I don't think it's a Democrat and Republican thing. I think they've both drastically failed the poor, but it's a little bit maddening these days to hear.
Yeah. So kudos to you guys for, following the spirit in your heart to do what you're doing. So would you call yourself a religious community? Are there vows?
I think that's a conversation that's ongoing.
Okay.
But we have a core. So right here on the farm right now, I really wish a religious order had given us another opportunity, or another diocese had given us another opportunity to have a larger place. What was so great about the 17 bedrooms is that you could have a lot of folks there. We really had to go out on our own and get our own mortgage and buy our own private place. So we don't have the setup here that we dream of. As houses around us go up for sale, we're always like praying and scheming to buy them so that we can have that sort of
So you can
facility.
expand.
Yeah, we need more of a facility to do, to have more families be a part of this here. But the community is sort of a little more spread out then. So we have folks who are in New York still, folks who are in Connecticut, folks who are in Boston, but Minnesota and California and Puerto Rico and,
Really?
sort of all over the place, who are connected to Benincasa and stay connected by coming to visit here, but also online and really in relationship with each other. And so the conversation is ongoing about, well, I'm committed to you and to one another for life. Like, we are committed to one another, but does that need a vow or not need a vow? And what would that vow be? I think that is like an ongoing conversation with the community about, and I think like the Catholic worker, there are no vows. Um, but I think we're still coming to understand. And I watched Dan's community. Sean and I met through Dan Berrigan's community. And like a certain generation can journey together. And I'm really interested in, we seem intergenerational in that we have like a connection to the sisters and older Catholic workers. So I feel like the founding members and an older generation are connected. The question for me is like, are we going to be able to pass this down to a younger generation? Like, does Benincasa, what is the lifespan of Benincasa? What is the lifespan of the Dominican sisters? What's the lifespan of any Catholic worker community? So I think this question that you ask about vows and commitment, it's a question we need to deal with, because I don't think vows ensure longevity, but I do think expressing a commitment to one another is a really beautiful thing. And an expression of that commitment seems valuable, because then also when the rubber meets the road, you've expressed that commitment and you got to show up. But something about the vows isn't speaking to folks. And I wonder if it's semantics or if it's like something about unsettled times. I don't know. It's
That's yeah. It's a
yeah.
good thing to discern. What I find so interesting, and I personally, I just think a lot of the local dioceses are caught up in, like you said, shuttering or joining parishes together, and with the crisis and the bankruptcies, their attention is drawn in a different direction. The seminary that I went to in Huntington is they just sold off 2/3 of the property for what,
Jeez.
and yet
Wow.
they still have the building. They have a building probably with 200 rooms, and they do some things with it. But looking to the new model that you're doing with Benecasa is, I just think, so encouraging. I find it, to be honest with you, I find it very attractive to say, "Whew, okay, wow, this is something new." Sometimes it's hard to call yourself a Catholic these days, to be honest with you, and yet you're taking that and kind of turning it on its head, and you're following the great traditions of the Dominicans and the Jesuits and Dorothy Day, and you're taking these inputs and creating something new, and yet what you're doing this is just a guy talking from the hip here, is you're answering to the call for the thirst that people have out there, not only for the thirst of the people who have to be served, the poor, but those who want to serve and are looking for more,
Mm-hmm.
just looking for more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And may
Yeah.
realize, you know what, that more may be community,
Mm-hmm.
going on a journey, having a
Mm-hmm.
roadmap, being with other people in community that you find joy with in
Mm-hmm.
service.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people don't, yeah, what do you do it? I get so much joy out of it. Yeah, but you're throwing so much of your time. Yeah, but I get joy out of it, and that's why I do it.
I think because of the current moment that we're in, I don't know, like, it's hard to get a bellwether, like a measurement of like people's happiness with America, right? Like, I'm in Connecticut. Like, I don't know what people in Nebraska are thinking. I don't know what my neighbor 2 towns away is thinking, right? But so these sweeping generalizations aren't always spot on, but I have a sense that, like, we now know the emperor has no clothes, that
Right?
there's no culture in America, right? Like, I think we've come to this place, like, there's no driving force of value as America, right? As a country. And so, like, the more is just like, I think that's like hitting the nail on the head. Like, people are like, what else is there? This is a hollow culture. This is a shallow and hollow culture. And so, what's going to be the driving force here? What's the more than what's being presented to us as our institutions crumble? Our educational institutions, our healthcare systems, as these systems sort of are like actively being defunded,
Mm.
what is it that it means to be in this culture? And I don't think the church as an institution is a good guiding force. You know,
Right, I agree.
I don't think that they know what they're doing, but I do know that the spirit lives on and lives very actively, very enlivened. The spirit is alive in the women religious and in the Catholic worker, in communities like the plowshares. And that's the tradition that we come from. And so I'm certainly not saying it isn't elsewhere. I'm just saying, as this like white Italian American, that's the culture, that's the system that I was given to enter into. And I found the spirit there. And so I think, yeah, this country offers nothing in terms of values. And so where are we going to find the more?
Right. And you know, it is the lingering question, especially the past few years for me, is how do we bridge the gap between those we agree and disagree with?
Yes.
Right. And in the most simplest terms, I think it's in service. You know what? Hey, pick up that rope up there. I'm getting the shovel,
Yes.
because we're going to help
Yes.
Mary and Joe and Juan
Yeah.
and oh, okay. We're not asking if they're Democrats or Republicans or liberal or conservative. It's like, hey, we got somebody in need. And most, not everyone has empathy for, hey, I've been there. I need a helping hand up. And that's where community comes in place. And that's why we're doing, I'm circling back to this podcast is so one, I'm thankful and feel very blessed that you guys joined me today. And we're speaking to people out there. And by the way, we'll have links in the description for Benincasa Community. If you find an interest of, hey, you know what, this sounds really interesting, I want to learn more, I encourage you to reach out to Sean and Karen. But that's why we do this. That's why we want to tell these stories so people go, yeah, things are falling apart, but man, I'm going to check this out. I think this is going to be good for me or my daughter, my granddaughter, or whatever. And that's why we're using social media to
I
spread the
just do
gospel.
no, that's exactly right. I just wanted to give Sean and I a chance to talk about personalism, because I think that
Okay.
you are just like skating on top of that concept. And I don't know, something Sean and I talk about a lot, because it's Peter Morin, who's the co-founder of the Catholic Worker, that is like a driving force and a tenet. But the idea that, like, Christ, the God, our God alive, is in another person and in every person. And
Right.
Thomas Berry would certainly have like grasped onto this concept. But yeah, I think Sean and I just want to like hit the point that, like, these are not in institutions. So, like, it doesn't, like you're just saying about Democrat and Republican. I'm terrified of Trump, but like that doesn't mean that I'm not wholly disappointed and terrified in like the Democratic regime either. Like it's not about institutions, it's about people, and it's about personalism. And so I don't know, Sean, if you just like, you speak so beautifully about that, but like that is like the word of the day. That is like, I feel like personalism is going to save us all. And Sean, maybe you can talk about more because.
Yeah, that'd be great. Sean?
Yeah. I mean, as I'm hearing you talk, Steve, the thing that I also want to mention, because I think that it is essential, is that as we're talking about bridging the divide, what we can't do is meet in the middle. It's not
Okay.
possible. Moderation leads to our sort of complacency, right? We've been moderate for way too long, and it's essential for us to actually be radical. And what that means is to get back down to the roots, to allow ourselves to be so connected to the earth and therefore each other, and therefore the divine presence in all things, that we no longer have those divisions, right? Because moderation and complacency is going to get us nowhere. So if we're connecting there, forget about it, right?
Gotcha.
That it's essential for us to actually get back to a place that is gospel-centered, that is God-centered, that is earth-centered, to understand, as Karen's saying, this personalist approach, that I'm engaging with you not from a place of service, but because you embody the divine spirit, right? That I'm connecting with you there. Whether you're a Republican, Democrat, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. That's where I'm connecting with you. That's what personalism is about, and that is the only way forward, because that place is grounded in love, and it's difficult love, right? It's
Yes.
the kind of love that is actually like wrestling with all of these systems that have placed these barriers on us and these boundaries that we put up, these walls. And so that kind of love is difficult and messy and complicated because it challenges the culture that we've allowed ourselves to be caught up in that does actually divide us. And so that personalist approach is an effort to kind of turn off all of that noise, all of those kind of divisions that are set up by a system that desires to control us, and actually allow us to get to something integral, radical, and get back to the gospel and get back to our understanding of what it is to be in relationship and good relationship with each other and the earth. That's what personalism is about, and that is the only way forward.
Interesting. I gotta tell you a story, quick story that jumps out at me as you're explaining this to me. I was doing a survey, and it was a Sikh temple or something like that, and I'm watching the head guy, and everyone who came into this gentleman would take their hand and touch the tip of their foot, their shoe.
Mm.
And I'm saying to myself, wow, what's that all about? So after everyone walked out, I said, sir, I have to ask, what is that? He says, they're respecting the light of God within me and vice versa. And I'm getting the chills just saying it. And that's a radical, to me, it was like a radical statement. But yet, as I reminisce about this, is when we see that light in everyone, and hopefully they see the light in us in what we do, that's a point of connection, a radical point of connection to change the collective culture.
And Steve, I would just say, I think the sisters, the Dominican sisters, women religious, the Catholic workers, Dan's community, the plowshares, they give themselves the freedom to prioritize what we're calling personalism, the understanding the light in you is the light in me, right? Like,
Right.
you have to order your life to prioritize that way of being. And that, I think, when I think about the end of religious life as we know it, right? Like, and it always wasn't this particular form. It's changing all the
Always
time,
evolve.
right? Yeah. But when I think of like the end of groups of people committed to one another who are sharing their resources so that they can do the works of mercy, I think about the freedom that is being lost to spend 2 hours with somebody, to see or to feel or to engage with the light in them. Because That's really what religious life or the Catholic worker structures gives you, is freedom to prioritize that. If I go to my job as a housing attorney or as a professor or, caring professions, and as a nurse, I still have to see 100 patients a day or whatever. I still have to get through this many papers, right? We are doing good works in systems that still require us to have a too high of a caseload or to
Right.
comply with grant regulations. Like, we're still constricted in a way that doesn't allow us to just say, you know what I did today? I spent 6 hours with this one person standing in line to get them hooked up with Social Security,
Right.
right? Because that's how long it takes, because you got to wait on the phone, then you got to go to the office, then you got to resubmit the thing, right? And I mourn the loss of that freedom to say, we are in this together, and nobody is going to tell me that I wasted my 6 hours because
Mm.
I am, or that I didn't work hard enough because I spent 6 hours with one person. And I really I hope that as we are thinking about how to continue religious life in some form or support the Catholic worker movement, that we say this is what's most important, this personalism, that we are not treating people like numbers. We're not trying to hit a goal of serving this many people or getting this many people into this program, but we are acknowledging the humanity in the person in front of us. And maybe the first thing we need to do before we get them hooked up with the program is take them out for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, when I think of the nuns,
Right.
that's what I think of. I think of women who are like, Karen, I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to ask you some questions about you. And I'm going to have coffee with you. And I am going to walk down the hallway with you as a person. And, like, here's the part where I get choked up, right? Because I think, like, and at the end of the day, this is the thing that we should be most proud of.
Mm.
The wasted time with our neighbors. Like, this is the thing we should be most proud of. That we have slowed down and spent time with people, which communicates to them that I love you, that you are loved. And like you were saying, Steve, and that person is communicating back to me that I am loved, right? And like, that takes time. And I think that takes freedom and that takes time. God, where is today going to take me? Like, I'm going to follow God today. And your nonprofit job does not want you to follow God today. Your nonprofit job has a schedule for you to follow.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah. It is as we examine what happens, great Jesuit practice, doing the examine at the end of the day. We look back, the examine we do at the end of our life, and say, what did I cherish? And I always, by the way, first I want to say thank you so much. I feel so enriched by just talking to you today, and I appreciate your time with me. I look forward to seeing you in person and coming up to Connecticut. I need a retreat like tomorrow. Anyway, thank you so much. There's so much we could talk for days, and I really appreciate things. And I learned what I'm thinking about is that being present to somebody, or truly present to somebody, relating something in a story, or just listening and asking questions. It's very rare sometimes in one's day at work. So I value that. And I learned a good lesson. A friend of mine named Bob was volunteering at some charity event, and the coach of the Mets and the Yankees, I'm forgetting his name right now. And he thanked Bob for his time. And Bob just, no, it's nothing. And he stopped him. He said, no, Bob. He goes, you know what? We can account for what we have in the bank, what we own. We can never account for the time we have left.
Yes.
And I'm going to say this to the both of you. The time that you've given me today was very precious. I thank you for that and for what you do. Thank you. Thank you.
We thank you. Like, we started out, like, it's Sunday morning for you too. So, like, we're conscious of that. Thank you.